Okay, so we are continuing looking here in the Gemara, on the Talmud, on Nun Vav, Sanhedrin. Didn't I have one with the translation last time? No? Oh, you had English? I'm not 100% sure. I think so. Okay. You want the one with English?
If it's possible.
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Oh, you want me to get it?
No, I'll get it.
Unos par de meses, no sé cuánto está.
Sí, tú eres dominicano. ¿Y qué te hizo venir a una iglesia judía?
Una historia larga.
Ah,
Si te lo explico cuando termine de grabar.
ok.
This is what you had last time?
I think so.
Okay. No problem. So we're down here at the bottom. This is the way it works over here. It's translated. Each page.
I don't know. That's all right.
Okay. Each page is translated with corresponding. You have to look where the gray line is. So if I'm at the bottom of the page over here, like this one over here translates further up. There's 4 pages in English for every page in Hebrew, basically. So they keep reprinting 5 pages. They keep reprinting the Hebrew one because we're still on that, studying that and there's just more English translations. I don't know if it makes sense what I just said. You'll get the hang of it. But here we're in the bottom line. Okay, so we're in the Talmud Sanhedrin, the tractate in Sanhedrin on page 56. And it says over here, Tana Rabbanan. The sages taught. Sheva Mitzvos nistavu b'nei Noach. There are 7 commandments that were commanded to the children of Noach. And if you look on the top over here, it explains, it sends us to the Rambam, to Maimonides, and it tells us where to look it up. Okay, so we could do that at a different time. We could look up those laws. You want a copy here? I'm gonna here. You want to pass this to? Just show where we're on the bottom of the left page. Okay. So Tana Rabbanan, Sheva Mitzvos nistavu b'nei Noach. The 7 commandments that were commanded to the children of Noach. Dinin, which means laws, justice, the obligation to establish courts of law. Birkas Hashem, not to curse the name of God. The next is an abbreviation. If anyone's following this along, you can go to a website called Sefaria.org, and you can see the Gemara online. There's other places also that show you the pages of the Talmud. Look at page 56. So Birkas Hashem Avodah Zarah means the foreign service. Foreign service means serving foreign idols, foreign ideologies. Gilui Arayos means to say sexual immorality. The Shvichus Domim, and spilling blood, meaning to person to murder someone or to murder himself, is forbidden. The gezel, theft, and the aver min achai, and eating the limb of a living animal. So you following? So now we reach the end of the first line. Excuse me. So okay, so now these are all commandments that apply to every single human being with the 10 commandments. In Rabbi Yonah Steip's book, holy book called Mitzvos Hashem, the commandments of God, in the section on the commandments for the children of Noach, he explains over there that Shem, who was the son of Noah, was actually teaching the seven and not to belong to other people. So really, there's different ways in which these could be formulated and can be understood. And we're going to see that there's many other commandments that apply to non-Jews also. In fact, there's a Gemara, another Talmud section of the Talmud that talks about 30 commandments. And we're going to see that there's many details to these commandments. So next, Rabbi, we're going to the top of the next page. So we turn the page, top of page Nun Zion, which is 57. Sorry, Nun Vav on base, 56, second side. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamla, Eimer, and if you look on the side, there's an emendation correction in the printing. So it's supposed to say Gamliel. So Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, he was a Torah sage. His name was Chanina, and he was the son of Gamliel. Eimer. He says, Af al adam minachai. Blood from a living animal. So a person, no human being is allowed to eat the limb of a living animal and eat the blood of a living animal. Rabbi Chidka Eimer, Af al sius. Rabbi Chidka, who was another great Torah scholar, said they're also commanded not allowed to castrate an animal. So all this that they do today, that they castrate animals, dogs and bulls and stuff like that, that's all forbidden. It's forbidden for any human being to do that. To prevent an animal from reproducing, from procreating, is a forbidden act. Rabbi Shimon Eimer, Af ala kishuf, not only on Avodah Zarah, but also kishuf, which is like magic, occult type stuff. That's also forbidden. Rabbi Yossi Eimer, Kol ha'emor, the Parshas Kishuf ben Noach mus halav. And everything that is mentioned in the Torah portion about Kishuv, a Ben Noach is mushar alav. He's commanded not to do it. Not only is he commanded not to do it, but he's punished for it. So if we go over here in, let's look this up. The next verse is going to be in Deuteronomy, chapter 18. So he's going to quote here. Deuteronomy chapter 18. And so it says over here, okay, let's look at page 1169. In this Torah book. The Torah. So listen, let's see what it says over here.
What?
1169. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10. Okay, now 1169. We see over here, the Torah says, "Lo yimatze b'cho ma'avir b'nei ubitoi be'esh kaisim kasamim la'inin menachish machashiv." The next verse says, "V'chei v'chei b'derish el hamisim." So it says specifically, there must not be among you anyone who passes his son or daughter through fire. That's a cult of a idolatry called molech, or anyone who consults any of the following type of occult practices. A stick diviner, people can interpret things from sticks, a diviner of auspicious times, an illusionist, someone who divines things, figures things out from snakes and scorpions by putting a human body inside it, like under his arm. A diviner speaks from his mouth by placing a bone of an animal called a yadua in his mouth, or a diviner communicates with the dead, either by talking to a skull or dead body. Now, you're going to tell me this stuff exists. This stuff really exists. People really do these kind of practices. These were ancient practices that were practiced. We're going to see in a second. But it's not just ancient practices. I went to law school in New Orleans, and I had a friend who lived in an apartment somewhere in New Orleans. And I went a couple times, visited him by his apartment. Anyways, he was on the second floor. So one time he tells me that when I showed up to visit him, that the police had been there on the first floor because they were investigating grave robberies. People were actually opening graves and stealing the skulls. And they found on the first floor apartment, they found skulls. People were taking skulls and they're doing this kind of occult practices with these skulls. So this is real. People really do these things. And even though it's not so much known in society, but there's still these occult practices.
What is it that they do though?
They try to get information, tell the future, talk to people who are dead. They want to talk about, know what's going on. Here, it says in the footnote over here in 10-15 on page 1168, divination. The intent of divination, divining something, is to predict the future in order to enable one to choose the most effective course of action in the present. The Torah forbids this because we are supposed to lead our lives according to its laws and not according to any notions we may have of what might prove advantageous. We have to do the right thing regardless of what the outcome is going to be. So in the gray areas of life, those issues about which there is no explicit directive from the Torah, regarding which someone might be in doubt regarding what to do, for example, what career to pursue, whom to marry, etc., it is permissible and even advisable to attempt to ascertain God's will through means that he himself has provided. As the Torah here describes, we are allowed to consult bona fide prophets for this purpose. And ever since the close of the era of prophecy, the inspired insight of reputable sages of the Torah has taken their place. So now let's see. Now this is the verse that Rabbi Chidka is quoting. I'm sorry, Rabbi Shimon, the Torah sage in the third line. Rabbi Shimon is quoting. And he's saying, he quotes this verse. So if you look at the top over here, so this is the Talmud. And then this over here is the commentary of Rashi. Rashi is the same person who wrote this commentary on the Torah over here. So he wrote a commentary on the Talmud, and he explains why is Rabbi Shimon bringing this verse to establish that it's forbidden for a person to be involved in any kind of these occult practices. So, because what does the verse say? The verse says, there must not be, there must not be among you, and he's speaking to the Jewish people, right? So you might say to yourself, well, this is a command just for the Jewish people. It doesn't apply to the non-Jews. The non-Jews are not told that they cannot do this. So let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says, this here, B'Parshas Machashiv, Zuhi Shamaski v'Hoilech lo yimtza b'cha. That he's mentioning here, and he continues in this verse, you should not be found in you, because the next verse says, as we're going to see we see in the Gemara, he continues, Rabbi Shimon continues, now we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, line 8. Ubiglal ha'ta'ivis ha'ela Hashem alakecha meish eisam Mipanecha. What is the verse? Let's look at verse 12. Let's look inside on page 1169. Whoever does these things becomes himself an abomination to God. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving out the present occupants of the land of Israel who practice them from before you. It's because the people who lived in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, before the Jewish people came in, they were practicing these things. And God says, because they're doing these abominable things, these terrible things, that's why I'm kicking them out. So the Gemara continues, "V'lo anash ela im ken hisir," and they would not be punished by being thrown out of the land that they lived in unless they'd been warned before, because God doesn't punish a person for something he didn't tell. So Rashi explains over here, that the fact that they're punished for having this terrible conduct and being involved in all these divinations and occult practices, we learn from this that they must have been warned, that commanded not to do this, because you can't punish somebody. God will not punish someone unless they were already commanded and warned not to do it. So this is that now Rabbi Shimon has added. So we have the 7 commandments, and now they're adding, pointing other ones out that are also obligatory to the nations. Rabbi Lezer Eimer af ala klayim. So then he says over here, whether or not that they're, what about is not allowed to mate animals that are not from the same species. Person is not allowed to mix growing crops that are different crops, cannot mix them together, and cannot mix linen and wool. So Rabbi Elazar says, "Afal kalaim mutarim bnei kalaim lizrei kalaim ve'ein esurim ela b'harva." Forbidden mixtures, and not to graft one type of tree onto another type of tree. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar is saying that to wear mixture clothing, mixture of linen and wool, that is allowed, and they could plant the seeds of different crops together, but they are forbidden. But they're forbidden in mixing animals together. They cannot mix that are not meant to mate with each other, and they cannot mix together trees. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to go into a discussion of where do we know this from? Where are the verses in the Torah that explain these sources. Now we're going to learn, and we learn Rabbi Steif's Sefer that he says that we're going to learn this verse, and then we're going to see that this is only one source that we have for it. This is something that was already well established in God's communication to humanity, and that the verse is itself something that is how asmachta, meaning to say it's like we're pointing it out as a as being relevant, but it already existed in God already. Over here, right there. I find it best to put your finger if you want to follow along. There's no way to follow it.
It's just hard to like.
There's no way to
see
follow
where
it.
you're at.
Right. You got to keep your finger there. Okay, so we're in chapter 2 of Genesis. And we are in verse, second here. Um, okay. Page 15 in here. So put one finger there. Okay. Okay, so now Hanimili, Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar Kra. Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great Torah scholars, he says there's a verse that says page 15. This is chapter 2, verse 16. So the verse, let's see what the verse says here. V'yatzav Adonai Elohim ala Adam leimor mikol eitz hagan eichel te'ichel. And God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden, you may eat freely. Okay, so let's see what that means. V'yatzav Hashem Elohim ala Adam leimor mikol eitz hagan eichel. Really, it says in the verse. Sorry, Eichel Techel. So you're going to look over here, following along. Okay, so move your thumb for a second so I can see. Eichel to Eichel, right here. Beats. Okay, so the first word, which is Vaitzav, Elu Hadinim. This is referring to the courts of law, setting up courts of justice. We're on. Okay. So then he refers us to another verse in, also in Genesis. He says, because so this commanding has to do with educating, has to do with setting down what the law is. That is, interestingly enough, in the Gemara over here, in the Talmud, John, you might have an insight on this. If you've seen something that explains this, in the Talmud here, it says the laws for the non-Jews is dinim. It makes sense once we understand that it includes this educational component. Because if you don't set up the framework that you're transmitting this, then everything else is just going to be chaos. Let me see something here. Um, excuse me. Okay, go to page 105. Don't lose where we were before. We have to go back to page 15. God came to Abraham and Sarah, and he said to them that he's going to bless them with a child. He said he would send angels to bring them the message that God's going to bless them with children. And then the angels left, go to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And God decides he's going to tell Abraham about his plan. So in verse 17 here of chapter 18 of Genesis, God says, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? That he's going to go and he's going to destroy these cities? Because Abraham made, his name was changed to say that he is no longer Aram, the father of the area of Aram, but he's now Avraham. He's the father of Hamon Goyim. He's the father of all the nations of the world. His job is to take care of and shepherd all the nations of the world. So how could God destroy the children? He's the father. Abraham's the father. So how could he destroy the children that are in the city that's nearby him? How could I? God says, how could I keep my plans secret? I'm seeing it says over here, because I love them so much that I promised that he will surely become a great and mighty nation, and through him all the nations of the world will be blessed. This is a continuation of God's question. So it's all about Abraham's ability for the nation, and the nations of the world are blessed. God then and I know that he instructs his children to keep God's way with righteousness